Ladies and gentlemen, I now request your attention for the recitation of Holy Quran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤت الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثيرا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب.
He gives wisdom to whom He wills, and whoever has been given wisdom has certainly been given much good, and none will remember except those of understanding.
صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah. Ladies and gentlemen, I, Amna Tawhidi, on behalf of President Center for Aerospace and Security Studies, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan, and CAS team welcome you all to today's CAS seminar titled Food Security for Pakistan. CAS is an independent and non-partisan think tank that envisions to serve as a thought leader. Our mission is to provide independent insight and analysis on aerospace and international security issues. We shall now see a brief introductory video showcasing the scope of CAS's activities and message from President CAS.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. CAS was established in 2019 to fill in the knowledge and research gaps that existed in the domains of aerospace and national security in an otherwise think tank-rich capital, Islamabad. To achieve our objective of being amongst the best think tanks of the region and with focused mission, CAS has made significant contributions by providing policy guidelines on important issues of national interest, especially security, both in military and non-military domains, disseminated through direct as well as indirect engagement on regular basis. As part of the advisory board of the Government of Pakistan's National Security Division, CAS has and would continue to serve as a thought leader by providing independent, innovative, evidence-based solutions to strengthen Pakistan's national security, including specific emerging geostrategic and geo-economic situations. Maintaining a winning aerospace power requires high-end technologies that are not only cost-intensive, but their availability with the passage of time is likely to be challenging. In our region, these technologies are largely acquired. Therefore, working towards our vision of strengthening national security in all its domains through indigenization, CAS would continue to lay emphasis on innovative research on emerging technologies, including but not limited to cyber and space. We continue to enhance our reach through greater use of media, seminars, webinars, digital technologies, joint research, and cementing our relationship with domestic, regional, and global partners. Inshallah, in times ahead, we will continue to build upon our achievements.
At the onset, I would like to introduce the worthy speakers for today's seminar. Syed Fakhar Imam, who is the keynote speaker, is an eminent politician who has served as the Federal Minister for National Food Security and Research from April 2020 to April 2022. Earlier, he was the 11th Speaker of the National Assembly of Pakistan, as well as Chairman of Pakistan's Parliamentary Special Committee on Kashmir. Mr. Imam was educated at Aitchison College in Lahore and Clifton College in England. Our second speaker is Dr. Abid Suleri, who is Executive Director of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. He also co-chair of the board of Climate Action Network South Asia and serving as a member of the Permanent Organizing Committee of South Asia Economic Summit and the Pakistan Climate Change Council. Earlier, he was a member of the advisory board of the CAREC, Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation think tank network. He was the lead expert in the World Economic Forum's transformation mapping initiative from Pakistan. Dr. Suleri regularly writes on sustainable development issues in mainstream print and electronic media and is editor-in-chief of the Journal of Development Policy, Research and Practice. He did his PhD in food security from the University of Greenwich, United Kingdom. Our third speaker is Mr. Ashfaq Mahmood, who has served as Federal Secretary in Government of Pakistan. His important assignments included Federal Minister of Water and Power, Planning and Development, IT and Telecom, Science and Technology, Finance, Special Secretary, and Managing Director of the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. He was also President of the National Engineering Services of Pakistan and National Power Construction Company, and in charge of the Energy Wing of the Planning Commission for many years. He also served as head of the official delegation on the recent water disputes with India. Our fourth speaker is Ambassador Shafkat Kakakhel, who is chairperson of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute's Board of Governors. Earlier, he worked as Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, and Permanent Representative to the United Nations Environment Programme and the United Nations Center for Human Settlements Habitat. He also served as President of the United Nations Environment Programme's Governing Council. His overseas postings included Beirut, Cairo, Bonn, and Jeddah at junior levels, and in New Delhi and Nairobi as Deputy High Commissioner and High Commissioner, respectively. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite Dr. Ziaul Haq Shamsi, Director, Peace and Conflict Studies, CAS, to take over the proceedings of this seminar. Dr. Shamsi did his PhD in Strategic Studies from National Defense University, Islamabad. Dr. Shamsi has authored 2 books, Nuclear Deterrence and Conflict Management Between India and Pakistan, and South Asia Needs Hybrid Peace, both published by Peter Lang, New York, USA. He has also authored the translation of Sun Tzu's The Art of War in Urdu. He regularly writes opinion articles for Pakistan newspaper, both in English and Urdu, and regularly appears on national TV networks in current affairs program. Kindly, sir, take the proceedings.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahul azim. Honorable speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all for today's seminar on an extremely important subject, that is food security for Pakistan. Because Pakistan, being the 5th largest country in the world and a predominantly agri-based society, unfortunately faces serious concerns of food insecurity for various reasons. The essential elements of food security include the total and projected population, the availability of water, suitable climate, arable land, employment of innovative technologies, and availability of power supplies. Whereas in the policy domain, education, awareness, and incentives to the farmers, farm to market roads, and requisite storage infrastructure, and emphasis on value addition besides governance of the entire process, alongside adequate efforts in research and development. कल मुझसे एक नौजवान ने सवाल किया कि सर ये हर कुछ दिन बाद हम क्यों सुनते हैं कि पाकिस्तान एक इंतहाई नाजुक मोड़ से गुजर रहा है। इससे पहले कि मैं उसे जवाब देता, उसने दूसरा सवाल दाग दिया कि अगर पाकिस्तान ज़रई मुल्क है तो आटे के लिए लाइनें क्यों लगी हुई हैं। मुझे उसको जवाब देना पड़ा, मौसम भी खूब था, पानी भी कम न था, जरखेज थी ज़मीन, रब ने करम किया, फिर भी तरस रहे हैं रोटी को हम अवाम, शायद ख़त्म नहीं हुआ नाजुक जो मोड़ था। मैंने उसे कहा कि 18 जनवरी को तुम्हारा जवाब दूंगा। उसने सर 18 जनवरी को क्या है? मैंने कहा 18 जनवरी को इंशाअल्लाह ताला कैस में बहुत ही मोअज़्ज़िज़ शख्सियात और बहुत ही माहिर शख्सियात जो इस सब्जेक्ट की हैं तशरीफ़ ला रही हैं और हम उनसे 4 सवाल करेंगे। इफ़ पॉसिबल, व्हाट इज़ द इशू? मसला क्या है? हु इज़ रिस्पॉन्सिबल? सर अगर आप नाम ना लेना चाहें तो कोई बात, लेकिन निशानदही ज़रूर कर दें कि कहाँ कहाँ कोताही हुई है। एंड व्हाट शुड वी डू एंड टेक इमीडिएट एक्शंस जो इमीडिएट रिकवरी हो सके, एंड व्हाट इज़ द लॉन्ग टर्म प्लान। इन 4 सवालों के जवाब आज अगर हमें मिल गए तो हम गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान को भी इंशाल्लाह ताला फीडबैक देंगे और अवाम में भी ये प्रोग्राम पूरा लाइव जा रहा है। थैंक यू। एंड सर नाउ आई रिक्वेस्ट जनाब सैयद फ़खर इमाम साहब टू डिलीवर हिज कीनोट एड्रेस। शाह साहब तशरीफ लाइए।
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a privilege and a pleasure to be addressing audience, I'm sure, which is carrying people with a lot of thought, experience, and foresight into where the state of Pakistan stands today. The Honorable Air Marshal Saab, Farad Hussain Saab, and we just had about a few minutes of evaluation in a very short time of how our Air Force has done extraordinarily well in the last 75 years, if I may say so. Perhaps the country as such, the state of Pakistan, as I speak of the larger level, perhaps has not done what Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's thought and perspective was for the nation that he created. Stanley Walpott was a professor at the University of California. I happened to go to University of California, Davis, which was the supposed to be the premier institution on agriculture in the world. And it is one of the two perhaps still considered in the United States, along with Cornell, which imparts education on different aspects of agriculture. I went there as an undergraduate many years ago. And I visited that campus, which was only 3,500 when I was a student. Today, there are 35,000 students there. More than half are doing their PhDs. What is the issue? Who is responsible for where we stand today? And if we look at the larger context, $101 trillion is the world economy. The United States of America is $24 trillion GDP. China is now number 2. And from 1978 till 2023, the astronomical progress and advance that China has made, no other country has made, starting with the Industrial Revolution of Great Britain in 1760. That's where Britain became the superpower of the world, and they held that power for 200 years. Security, national security, international security, food security, they're all interlinked. You cannot divorce one from the other. And this is why I look at the larger picture. If two countries of the world today, the United States of America, which really came into its own post-World War II as the premier state of the world, dominating in all aspects. And it was through the Marshall Plan of $11 billion, they put Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Spain on its feet. We in Pakistan have been, if I may use the word, tottering for assistance from outside. And in my opinion, never using it to its optimum effect. It has directly impacted where we as Pakistanis, as citizens of Pakistan, I call myself a citizen of Pakistan, and when I look at myself, and the honorable gentleman here said, fifth, yes, 228 million approximately, because our census, unfortunately, we've not even abided by our constitution. We've had 3 constitutions, 11 other arrangements to run this country. And where have we got in that particular outlook of how life treats us today as citizens? Which is, we cannot meet. The lines that you talk of, sir, are correct. Last night I had 3 telephone calls from my district. I belong now to the small district of Khanewal. Used to be part of Multan. At one time I was elected district council chairman Multan, where I started with my politics. And he said, sir, we need 3 points of distribution of flour, wheat flour. And would you talk to the DFC? Because I'm constantly in touch on the ground as well. I saw these lines in Moscow in 1987. The Soviet Union government had invited me. I was leader of the opposition in the National Assembly after I had been ousted as Speaker of the National Assembly for taking certain stance for the people of Pakistan. I had to pay a price. Nevertheless, I was leader of the opposition, and the Soviet ambassador came to me 5 times and wanted me alone to go to the Soviet Union. I'd never been to Moscow. And as I got off the plane and I drove to the hotel, I saw lines of a superpower for bread. 1987. In 1999, the Soviet Union fractured into 6 states. We have also fractured in 1971. We don't like to talk about it. Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali's Janaz, Pakistan, is no longer today there. I find myself at fault as much as any of the others. So you would say the issue is particularly one. We have the largest irrigation system of the world, 25 million acres. We have approximately 50 million acres out of 196 million acres of Pakistan's land mass under cultivation. 31 million is irrigated, 19 million is non-irrigated, which we call Barani. And where do we stand? We have 5 major crops. Agriculture. Food security is part of agriculture. 5 major crops. We used to have 4 major. Wheat takes up 36% of our area. And that's where the problem is. We have failed, I'm part of it, to evolve varieties which give us high yields, and that's the key. Science, technology, education, starts with education. We have 5 major universities of agriculture, about 17 colleges affiliated to different universities. And how do they compare with the best in the world? How do they compare with our neighborhood, with our region? Not too well. I hate to say that. Because 2 things. Our curriculum is outdated. I, as minister, I was there for 23 months, felt, and I came there accidentally, which was, and they announced my appointment on television. I was never asked by anybody, including the Prime Minister. He was gracious enough to appoint me because he thought that perhaps I have the knowledge. I have the experience on the ground, I can tell you, hands-on. And what handicaps us? Food security. I'll just quickly go through the figures. 5 crops we have. Last year we produced 26.2 million tons. 2 years ago we produced 27.3 million tons. 2 years ago we imported about 1.9 million tons. This year when we were going out, we had predicted we needed 2.5 to 3 million tons of import. This government, because it was new, not new, it was there for the 5th time, but they somehow didn't take quick decisions. We've imported about 1 million tons. We should have imported 1.5. We just got about 1.17 million tons in from Russia recently. It's outside Karachi port. 0.4 million tons will come, they were saying, in March. Now, these are the crucial areas where the common man is suffering because aata mehenga ho gaya. From the farmer sold it at 2,200 rupees per 40 kg. Now it's selling anywhere between 4,000 to 5,000. And these are the issues which matter. Because awam jo hai, unhone kal vote dena aapko. They will judge us by these very issues. I think Mr. Imran Khan was very lucky, fortunate the way he went out. His rating was 31% in March. Today's rating is 57%. And the present government, PDM, they want to continue. You can see their rating is no more than 19%. For these very issues, the 5 crops, cotton has been a total disaster. We're down to 4.8 million. We've at the highest 14.8 million bales. India and Pakistan, we were ahead of India in 1991 cotton production. We were 12.8 million, they were 11.4. India, China, Australia took BT technology, bought it on the market. There was only one supplier, a private company in the United States. We refused. 1998, they came to Pakistan. I can name the people who refused it, but I won't. It's not proper. And between 1998 and today, 25 years have done, we have not acquired that technology even today. Yes, we have a few scientists who are trying their best to bring out the triple gene. But if Indian scientists and Chinese scientists couldn't do it, our scientists could not also. I don't blame them. Agricultural education, number 1. Agricultural extension, number 2. Agricultural research, 3. This is the key to improve agroeconomy of Pakistan. And where do we stand when we compare ourselves with the rest of the world? Not very high, unfortunately. Water is the other key, then soil. Soil is extremely important. There are 3 types of soil. There's sandy, there's loam, and there's heavy soils, clay. And we have the maps. Kashtkar tak hum nahi pahunchate. And then soil testing. These are the nimbler things which change the whole context of how agriculture takes place. Mechanization, modernization is the key. In Pakistan, I think the number of tractors, I forget the figure, is amongst the lowest in the world. But more important than the tractor, jo hamara tractor hai, it's not more than 75 horsepower. In the modern world, the tractors are between 125 to 200 horsepower because the economies of scale are so large. Hamare kashtkar jo hain, they're between 6 to 8 acres on the average. The American is 580 acres. China and Russia. Russia is the largest exporter of wheat, 40 million tons. हम तो सिर्फ 2.5 million ton की इस वक्त मार खा रहे हैं ना जी. Our production is 26.2 this year to 27.5 last year. Our population growth is amongst the 2.4%. We add a Singapore and a New Zealand every year to our country. Nobody talks about it. I raised this in cabinet 3 times. Not one person was willing to take up this issue with me. Water. We've not built a dam after Tarbela. And those were just 2 dams, Tarbela and Mangla, to replace the 37 million acre feet of water when we gave away Satluj, Byas and Ravi to India. We gave it away. That was the great Indus water plan. And we replaced only 9 million acre feet of water. Most of that is now dredged. I mean, not dredged, it's silted. Have we thought about it? Yes, we say we are building Bhasha Dam, we are building another dam, Dasu further up, not for water but for electricity. Hydroelectricity is the cheapest form of, over a period of time, cost. Energy is our major problem. Today we are crying कि जी हमारा 235 पे यूनिट चला गया. 235, sorry, for 1 liter of diesel. Now these are the actual things on the ground. But what have we done as decision makers, as people who sit and represent people in the parliament, as top class civils? We have some of the best civil servants in the world. I had a 6-hour meeting with Lee Kuan Yew, and he said to me, and you know, Lee Kuan Yew, 220 kilometers is the length and 40 kilometers, this is the city state of 5.5 million people. Their per capita income is higher than the United States of America today. And they were nowhere when Malaysia said, get rid of them. They didn't even drinking water properly. Human resource. Human resource. Human resource. Where does our human resource stand? Our agricultural universities, you can say the same thing about all our universities. Between 1 to 1,000 of the universities of the world, the rating takes place by 3 different independent institutions. You know, where do we stand? Our top university is Qaiyum 485. Because this impacts not just food security, security across the board. Food security is only one issue. Look at our neighbor. I don't like Mr. Modi at all. And as Kashmir chairman, the kind of hard-hitting statements I made, I don't think very many Pakistanis would do that. Because I believe that we got this country, this nation state, after a lot of difficulty. The then Viceroy of India, Whitehall, Westminster used to decide. And the Indian Congress Party came into being 20 years before the India Muslim League, 1906, 1885, 86, created by an Indian British civil servant called Hume. He created the Indian National Congress because they said now they must set themselves up. And from 1886 till today, where have they gone? They were going nowhere till 1991, till the Soviet Union broke up, because their relation economically, their Hindu rate of growth was 3 to 3.5%, 47 to 91. From 91 till today, it's gone up to 7%. And in that context that I spoke earlier of $1.1 trillion, where does India stand? Number 5. Yes, population-wise, they're very high. Number 2. They'll become number 1. But at least they are moving ahead. 7% growth rate from 91. The financial architecture set down by the man who became their prime minister, Manmohan Singh. 10 years, he was front man for the Congress party. He was the finance minister who came out to the World Bank and laid out that financial architecture, which they have perpetuated and become now a power. $100 billion is trade between China and India today, sir. What is the trade between Pakistan and China? $17 billion. Theirs is 100 billion, and they are enemies, supposedly. Trade, economy overcomes all kinds of hostilities. We have not built ourselves up in that way. Agriculture requires investment. Our rural development is really crying for investment. Investment has gone completely down in the last 25 years. That's why we are suffering. Education, extension, research. Our figures are abysmally low. That's what we need to do. You would say, why doesn't it do it? Let me give you the way that our budget works. 3,000 billion last year was for repayment of loan. 1,700 billion was the defense budget. 1,400 billion was went to the civil servants. 6 to 800 billion dollars left for the rest of Pakistan. That is your budget. And we could, over a period of time, we have been doing these things. Food security, to me, is crucial. I was yesterday looking at a book on Napoleon, which has come out recently. It's an 800-page book. Because to my mind, I think Napoleon was the greatest leader Europe has produced in the last 1,000 years. I look at Napoleon as a role model of leadership. And in that book, what did I find? How did he cope with his troops and his horses? He said, let's gather, because they have to feed before they go to battle. It's not the modern warfare. And nutrition was the key, both for horses and for men. And he said, if things don't get better, live off the land that you conquer. This was one of the themes of Napoleon that he was doing, which I was reading last night about. But today in Pakistan, we can't live off others, because nation states, after the Westphalia, as Kissinger says, 400 years back, now is concentrated along nation states. And there are 193 or 196 nation states of the United Nations. We, population-wise, are the 5th largest. But how many people now recognize Pakistan on that international firmament of nation states? Very few. Yes, we are nuclearized, no doubt. That was a great credit to us. And that's what's kept us from the Indians to encroach upon our territory. And our Air Force brought down that 2 airplanes. They did not react. They could have nuclear-wise, but no, so far. There's no Armageddon. And the future depends on research. On wheat, 31, 32 mounds per acre is our average. What is it in the world? It's nearly twice that much. Our neighbor in East Punjab is 60% more. 1 mound of extra average would add 8 to 9 lakh tons, 0.9 million tons. I'm just giving these just outside figures. I'm not going through the technocrat. You have the best technocrats are with me. This is why I'm not going into what they will be speaking on. I'm giving you the larger picture. Pakistan can make the breakthroughs, but we must invest in human resource and in research. There are 2 types of research. There is basic fundamental research, which Pakistan never attempts, because we never have that kind of equipment, nor that kind of human resource. And then there's applied research. Ours is totally applied research. We borrow things from outside. I was talking to the summit head when I was head of the institution. Summit is the place where Dr. Bolog averted famine of the world for the last 50 years. I met him 3 times, a great man. He was assistant professor in the United States University when he created Dr. Bolog. Norman Bolog is the man who gave you the green revolution. हमारे यहाँ 8 से 12 मन होती थी गंदम की पैदावार overnight because of 2 factors. Gandam did not lodge, and you could give as much water and fertilizer. And from 8 to 12 months, we went from 30 to 40 months per acre. That's what saved the world. India, most of all, and Pakistan and third world countries especially. Today, 776 million tons is the wheat production. China is the largest, 136 million. India is number 2, 114 million tons of wheat. We are 27. We have become importers for the last 2-3 years because of our population explosion. And we don't have the research like Bolog. We don't have a Bolog. So when I was talking to the Summit is where he worked. This is Mexico. It's an international organization. The IRI for rice in the Philippines, and Summit is in Mexico. So I said to the man, I said, you give us germplasm. Germplasm is the basis of how you actually breed, plant breeding. We get it by donation. So I said, I want to pay for the germplasm. I want the best germplasm. He says, you're the first Pakistani talking like this to me. I said, I don't like donation. I want to pay. It'll be $1 million, $2 million. What's that? We can afford it. And I said, I believe there are 3 other institutions better than you in your germplasm. So he got a little nervous. His number 2 spoke. He said, I'm from Netherlands, sir. I'm number 2. My number 1 doesn't want to. I'll answer your question. Netherlands is the leading agricultural country in the world. 13 million people, 13 million. 60% of the flour export is done through them, of $28 billion. फूलों की export वो करते हैं $28 arab की, which is as much as the total export of Pakistan. That is when you have specialized people, they can do it. So he spoke up. He says, what do you want? I said, I want to buy the best germplasm in the world. He said, there are 3 other institutions. He named them in America. He says, go and buy them from them if you don't want it from us. I said, I don't want it from you. So he said, I've been to Pakistan several times. Nobody talks the way you do. I said, well, welcome. I, for one, feel we should buy that germplasm, and my scientists must know that we've paid for it. ये जो हमें मुफ्त की चीजें मिलती हैं, we don't respect them. So he said, okay, what are you looking for? I said, I am looking for 40 million tons in 4 years' time for Pakistan. So he said, yes, if you can get those varieties and evolve them with better germplasm, you can do it. Now, these are the kind of issues that Pakistan requires. That is the kind of policymakers you need at the top. You don't want people who want trips outside, who want their children to get scholarship, with respect. Because this is how much of the way we have run this country has happened. Today we need a total paradigm shift. Today we need people at the top. Today we need amongst the best researchers from our own people. No German or Japanese. They completely transformed themselves. They'd been destroyed. Nagasaki, Hiroshima had totally wrecked Japan. General D. MacArthur gave them that constitution which has not changed a dot or a T on it. The constitution of Japan today, Diet, I've been to the Diet 2-3 times, the parliament. But look at the pride they have. The way they look at the world is a totally different form. The Japanese ambassador called me after our government had gone. 5 times he called. I said, I don't want to see you. He said, why not? I said, I have nothing to say. We've lost the government. He said, no, I don't want to talk about the government. I want to talk about your country. And what he had to tell me in private, I was very unhappy with. Anyway, that's another story. He said, we are an Asian nation. You are a nation. You are a nuclearized power. We would like to see you go up. What is your problem? Why are you not progressing? This, in short, was his theme. My answer is only one. Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, as Stanley Walpott said, his opening lines of his book, University of California, was, a man who changed the map of the world, a man who changed the course of history, and above all, he may be perhaps one or two of the people who created the nation state. This nation state was created for people like you and me. There were only 32 million West Pakistanis, 40 million East Pakistanis at that time. We have multiplied ourselves by 7. But what have we done in the end? We need dignity, we need honor, we need pride. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shahzab, for your insight. And now we know what the problem is. I can recall, sir, 1998, when I was doing the air war course, Dr. Gulfraz Saab gave us a lecture. And he said कि एक जोग्राफर जब चांद पे खड़ा होकर नीचे जमीन को देखता है तो ये जो इंडस वैली है, दिस इज अ जोग्राफर्स ड्रीम, क्योंकि इससे ज्यादा जरखेज जमीन टोपोग्राफी के हवाले से, पानी की अवेलेबिलिटी के हवाले से और क्लाइमेट के हवाले से उसको कोई नजर नहीं आती. बट एज यू राइटली पॉइंटेड आउट कि क्या प्रॉब्लम है कि हम उस पोटेंशियल पे नहीं पहुंच सके. नाउ वी हैव सम आइडिया. नाउ मे आई रिक्वेस्ट डॉक्टर अब्दुल कय्यूम सुलेरी साहब to present a critical appraisal of the food security situation and its impact on the social development of society and national security of Pakistan. Sir, floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's
it's extremely difficult to speak after Fakhar Imam Saab, but he has set the scene, and I think he has given you enough context. It would also give me some liberty to save time and skip few slides, because Fakhar Imam Saab has mentioned quite a lot about the issues. Now, the job for me is critical analysis of food security for Pakistan. And we had this annual conference in December. The title was Sustainable Development in Unusual Times, Triple C Crisis, we said. For the rest of the world, it's Triple C Crisis. For us, it's Tetra C Crisis. I'll tell you what is the fourth C here. But the three things that we were discussing COVID-19, we were discussing conflict, and we were discussing climate change. The three C's which are shaping the world, the three C's which are influencing the securities, not only traditional security, but also non-traditional security, including food security. Now, if one looks at food security, the three pillars of I think it doesn't work. Okay, the three pillars of food security. It's about availability, that is, food has to be physically available. It is about socioeconomic access. The food, if it's available, it must be socially and economically acceptable to us. And then absorption. One can have best of the best food and then have a glass of contaminated water. The result would not be food security. The result would be food poisoning. And the three, they are actually being affected by the 3C crisis that we said, by COVID, by conflict, by climate change. The fourth pillar of food security, of course, is sustainability. And the Triple C crisis is affecting the sustainability. But then there is something extra. When we talk of food security, it's not only these external factors. There are two other factors which can affect our food security, and that is the health of crop and animals, both diseases as well as pest outbreak. Now, let's take COVID first. During COVID, the world economy it shrank by around 4.3% in 2020. The cost of COVID in 2020 and 2021 was about 10.3 trillion in foregone output. So this is the type of pandemic that we have braved, the world that have braved so far. COVID undid the progress of decades. So it was for the first time in 2019-2020 when after decades the world poverty it actually increased. So whatever progress one had made on social development goals, on fighting poverty, fighting hunger, COVID actually reversed it. And this was in 2021, March 2021, when UN chief, he warned of risk of famine for millions around the world. And at that time, there was no Russia-Ukraine conflict, and there was not the type of climate change manifestation that we have seen in 2022 and the later part of 2021. So even if there was no conflict and if there were no extreme weather events of 2021 and 2022, the world was already heading towards famine due to COVID-19. Now, again, when one look at the 10 countries or territories with the highest number of people in crisis, you can find Pakistan is one of them. And it's again before that Russia-Ukraine war and before the floods of Pakistan. So Pakistan, if you look, it is at the 8th number, 9th number among the worst 10 countries which were facing food insecurity. And at that time, it was only due to crisis and emergency. Of course, now catastrophe is also has added into it. The second C that I wanted to talk about is conflict. Conflict between Russia and Ukraine and other conflicts of the world. The war in Ukraine, it has affected the food security world over. Global food supply that has disrupted, prices have disrupted. Russia is one of the exporter of fertilizer ingredient after energy, and humanitarian operations, they got affected. World Food Program, they used to buy 60% of their humanitarian supplies from Ukraine, which they are not able to buy now. And due to this war in Ukraine, humanitarian operations, which are least talked about, we keep on talking about other factors, but we don't talk of the supplies for humanitarian operations. This was the piece that I wrote early in March 2022 when the war had just started. And at that time, it was quite clear. Of course, I'm not a soothsayer, but it was quite clear that the world is heading towards a stagflation because of the supplies that Russia and Ukraine, they were making to world. Not only the natural gas, but second largest oil supplier, third largest coal exporter, one of the largest supplier of aluminium, copper, fifth of battery grade nickel, and also of the potassium and other fertilizer ingredients. And same is for Ukraine. And it was quite clear that the world was heading towards a stagflation, which it has now. Now, if one looks at the dependency, the wheat imports from Russia and Ukraine, you would find that Pakistan has been importing roughly around 45% of its wheat from Russia and almost 55% of its wheat in Ukraine. And of course, with this lack of one source of supply, it became inaccessible. Second, it is non-kosher. You are not allowed to import from it. And due to this sanction and the war effect, that has actually aggravated the problems of food insecurity. And then there is another factor that we need to keep in mind. When we were talking of the 10 food crises hit countries, among them, Pakistan, at that time when this report was published by IOM, Uganda was the top country which was taking care of 1.6 million refugees and asylum seekers after the latest influx of Afghan refugees after Taliban took over there. Now Pakistan has exceeded Uganda. So Pakistan is hosting one of the highest number of refugees and asylum seekers in the world, among the top 10 food countries which are facing food insecurity and which are facing stagflation. And then the third C, which is climate change. I know Shafkat Kaka Khail Sahab would educate us on it. But when we say that people, they are going back, I think it's a misnomer. People, they are going back in stagnant water. And as of 31st of December 2022, according to this United Nations satellite imagery, almost 8 million people, they remain exposed to or living close to flooded areas. Again, in the winter, 35 districts, they have been categorized by United Nations as the winters, which would be the districts which would be severely affected by winter. In Sindh province, people, they are still homeless. And then on top of it, the lands, they are not cultivable. Even if water had receded, land markers are not there. The moisture content in the soil and the lack of availability of input, and also the flood also ruined the wheat deposits, the wheat reservoirs of Sindh Food Department. Cotton, we already know that as of 15th of January, the cotton intake, the yield was 35% less than the previous yield. And wheat sowing for the next year, that would also get affected. So this is the type of effect climate change or floods they have had on our food security. And the fourth C, which I said that the world is getting affected by triple C crisis, COVID, conflict, and climate change. We have the fourth C as well, which is complacency. Knowing and mindful of all the three, we were complacent and we are still complacent. You asked about the wheat shortage and the wheat flour shortage. We need to understand it is also due to political instability. Food Department Punjab, it procures wheat till end of March, and it releases subsidized wheat to the flour mills somewhere in September. That is the usual practice. So from April to September, August, private sector and the private investors, their wheat is utilized by the flour mills, and then government releases its wheat on a subsidized rate. This year, 2022, due to all this political circus which was going on and due to political instability in Punjab, the tug of war, Food Department Punjab, it started its releases in April itself. So in March, they completed the procurement drive, and in April, since April, they have been providing subsidized wheat to the flour mills, which means that the private sector was very happy, and they had they still have all their reservoirs with them. So due to this bad timing, Food Department Punjab have already sold 1.5 million tons of wheat to the flour mills, which it should not have done from April till September. And that created an extra shortage. Today, when we talk of lack of availability of wheat flour and wheat, part of the reason is that private sector is holding its wheat, and now it's selling on whatever rates they can demand for. Government, because it doesn't have any more surplus, it is now trying to maintain the supplies on a day-to-day basis. So it is not able to control the price of wheat and wheat flour. I have been writing on it during all those months, but because of, as I said, that this political instability in Punjab, all the struggle between chief ministers, no one was paying attention what Food Department has been doing, which I think it's a criminal practice. Now, another dimension of it is this lack of consensus between federal government and the provincial government on the minimum support price of wheat. Now, if like always, if Sindh would be buying wheat at a rate of 4,000 rupees per 40 kg, Punjab would be buying it at 2,600 rupees per 40 kg. So there is an incentive of 1,400 rupees. All I have to do is to take my wheat from Rahim Yar Khan to Sindh, and I'll be getting 1,400 rupees per man more. So the flour mills now, even if they are getting all the subsidized wheat, they know that the wheat procurement season is just 2 months around the corner. And if they can hoard that wheat today and they can sell it at 4,000 rupees per ton at an official rate, or even higher at unofficial rate in Sindh, they don't need to take that wheat to Afghanistan. All they have to do is to take that wheat from Punjab to Sindh, sell it there, make their profit. So I think this complacency and these astute policies, they are affecting and they are aggravating our wheat crisis. The last thing on this which I wanted to tell is that under the guidance of Fakhar Imam Sahab, we had started that food security dashboard. SDPI got a software developed on and gave it on a pro bono basis to the government of Pakistan that could track the real-time movement of perishable and non-perishable commodities from one district to another district, including the wheat. Fakhar Imam Sahab supported it. The previous government supported it. We gave it to Ministry of Food Security and Research. We gave 3 staff members from SDPI who could train the ministry officials. After the government PTI government vote of no confidence, that use of that software, it simply got abandoned. So all the investment that we made on the software, on human resources, that got wasted. But it is not only the investment, it is about we were able to track on a real-time basis when a truck leaves from any godown in Punjab and goes to another district. So all of that was updated on a daily basis. So the movement of wheat, the movement of rice, movement of potato, tomato, everything, that software had got that capacity. And we took 1.5 years to get it implemented. But if you don't want to use your data, if you don't want to look at your policy failures, and if you don't correct what we have been doing for last many years, this disparity of minimum support price between federal government and the province, I think that's type of disaster that one is observing today, people queuing up for wheat and wheat flour, that had to be there. I'll just skip these slides. It is our ranking on global hunger index. Our serious is considered, condition is considered as serious. And this is again before the floods. If you want to see that what were the condition of food security in the country before COVID, before conflict, and before floods, this is the type of Pakistan we had according to the latest and the last National Nutrition Survey of 2019. After that, we didn't have any updated statistics, but according to 2019 National Nutrition Survey, 40% of our children, they are stunted, 17.7 they are wasted, 28.9 are underweight, and then obesity is also hitting us, 9.5% they are overweight. If we look at the spatial distribution of wasting and stunting, so you will find that most of Pakistan is either wasted or stunted, and this is, so we are talking, and also malnutrition is something which affect the human brain development. So malnutrition in the first 5 years of growth, it cannot actually be reversed afterwards. So when we are talking of future, we are talking of a generation which is malnourished, which has low IQ, which is stunted, which is wasted, and then we say that we will be embarking upon the next generation, this fourth industrial revolution. This is again that around 37% of our population back in 2019, it was observing some sort of food insecurity. And now after COVID, after floods, and due to this stagflation that Pakistan is passing through, these numbers, those have must exceeded a lot. Now, when we talk of social dimensions of food insecurity, the Article 38 of Pakistan Constitution, it provides a guarantee. State is responsible for social and economic well-being of people, and it explicitly refers to equity in food. We are also signatory to more than a dozen conventions, international conventions, according to which it's a state's responsibility to take care of food security. And when it doesn't happen, insecurity breeds insecurities. So there's the 4 level of security setting. We have global, regional, national, and individual or human security. And my thesis is that individual or human security is the foundation of all other securities. So if we are compromising here, we are compromising on our national security needs, we are compromising on our regional security, and we are compromising on our global security. And unfortunately, again, due to this political instability and stagflation, individuals today, they are more insecure than they were before COVID, they were before Russia, Ukraine conflict, and they were before floods. And it's not that the governments, they are not doing enough. This is 2012, when with Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani, SDPI, we had been working, and we were trying to, even we got this Pakistan National Zero Hunger Initiative approved, but it could never take off, just like the food security dashboard. Similarly, if you remember the first speech of Imran Khan, where he had these MRI scans of a healthy mind and a healthy brain and a malnourished brain. Again, I can argue that despite having political will, most of the governments, they could never take this food security initiative further. So while at the top there was from Yusuf Zaghilani, from his predecessors till today, each of the prime minister and the president, they're mindful of the fact food insecurity, but then somehow the policies, they remain stagnant and we can't move forward. Due to paucity of time, I'll just skip a few slides, but the point I wanted to highlight here is precision agriculture. And because I'm here at CAS, precision agriculture has a role to play for our future food security. And when I say precision agriculture, I'm talking of use of drones, I'm talking of use of agriverse cloud, I'm talking of getting information through multi-optic sensors. The same sensors which can tell you about landmines, they can also tell you about the pH value of the soil, they can tell you about the soil nutrition level, they can tell you about many other properties of soil, and depending upon your sensors, up to the depth of 3 to 5 meters. I think the future of food security and the future of climate smart agriculture lies with precision agriculture, use of data, use of your GPS systems, and use of drones for monitoring, as well as for taking timely decisions. I will also propose weather index-based insurance. It is tested in many countries in Africa and Latin America. We have the historical weather patterns of districts, the rainfall and temperature. Anything goes above or below those patterns, the farmers, they are insured. So governments, they pay premium for small farmers. And if any extreme weather event for an extended period of time, depending whatever the definition is, the farmers, they get their insurance. And the same thing can be and should be introduced in Pakistan, keeping in mind that we are being warned that we will be facing more extreme weather events. Fakhar Imam Sahab very rightly mentioned about institutional arrangements. Our agriculture universities, agriculture research, and agriculture extension, they don't talk to each other. Whatever is being taught in agriculture universities is not told to agriculture extension workers, and whatever agriculture extension people they are telling to the farmers, they don't ask from agriculture researchers. And I think unless and until we bring these three in some sort of synchronization, we'll keep on investing our meager resources, thinly spread them, and we will not be able to get the result. And the same for this the minimum support price, federal government and provincial governments. The need for smart subsidies. In the previous government, PTI introduced Kisan cards. I'm happy to note that People's Party have now introduced Hari cards. Due to this political difference, even that initiative, it could not get replicated in Sindh during previous government time. And I remember while working with Fakhar Imam Sahab, once a summary was brought to my notice. Sindh government, they wanted to get extension in some of the allocation that federal government had made for Sindh Agriculture Department. Secretary was quite upset, and I was asking him, what's the problem? Why don't we give Sindh an extension? He told me, sir, it's not the extension for 6 months, it's extension for 1.5 years. So Sindh is not talking about the allocation of year 2021, that it should be extended by another 6 months. Sindh is talking about the allocation that federal government made in 2020. Sindh couldn't spend it in 1.5 years. Balochistan, we had been trying to, even in the agriculture transformation meeting, we invited the chief minister twice and prime minister ordered him, Balochistan couldn't even prepare any scheme in its annual development plan. So if it's not about resources only, it's about giving it a priority. And I can say that my stint in Ministry of Food Security and Research with Fakhar Imam Sahab, I could see that the federating unit, they simply don't have appetite. I'm not talking the word using the word capacity. They don't have the appetite even to spend the allocation that federal government is providing them, what to talk of their own resources. Precision agriculture, I have already talked about. My final slide, and I think we need to think of going forward. There are some policy conundrum that we need to think of. Now the federal government and Punjab government, they're talking of solarization of agriculture tube wells. I think we need to assess the pros and cons of this policy. Indiscriminate water extraction, that would have similar result as we had in Balochistan when we provided a flat rate electricity tariff there. If we are solarizing agriculture tube wells, we need to make it conditional that anyone who have a solar agriculture tube well should have drip irrigation. Otherwise, they will not have, the farmers, they will not have to pay electricity bill, they will not have to pay the diesel charges. They would keep on extracting water from the whole 8 or 10 days till they have the solar light available, and that would play havoc with our water table, that would play havoc with our soils, which would become sodic and saline. The second is subsidized gas for urea. Now, I think we need to again review this policy. It is simply not feasible, and especially after Ukraine war, when Germany has already, last year, they contracted with Qatar the LNG for $65 billion. So the European buyers, they have crowded Pakistan out from Gulf market. We will not be able to get LNG, and we will not be able to get a cheaper LNG. And if we cannot, we have to review our policy of providing subsidized gas for urea. I think what is required, and that's why precision agriculture is important, that farmers, they keep on using fertilizer without having any soil analysis done. Depending upon their resources, if they have money for DAP, they will apply DAP. If they have money for urea, they will apply urea. But this policy needs to be reviewed. Spot price for wheat needs to be reviewed. There is a circular debt created in Punjab due to this wheat support price, and it's not today, it's for last almost 20 years, just like electricity circular debt. We also need to assess the effectiveness of support systems, utility store and Ramzan Bazaar and Sasta Bazaar. One need to get a realistic assessment done on their administrative cost vis-a-vis the type of relief that consumers they are getting, and if it is not feasible, perhaps we need to think of something different. And finally, crop per drop concept. When we are talking of Pakistan being a water scarce country, we need to see our agronomic practices, and we need to see when we are exporting rice, whether we are exporting our water. I'll stop here. Sorry for taking some extra time, but I wanted to highlight some of these policy issues so that you can forward it to the relevant quarters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Important thing that I can pick up, I mean, the entire presentation in a very scientific manner. But the governance issues that I did point out in my introduction, क्योंकि एक आम आदमी यही पूछता है कि इस साल गंदम कम हो गई है और इस साल टमाटर कम हो गया है, इस साल प्याज कम हो गई है, इस साल अदरक नहीं मिल रही है. So now we know कि गवर्नेंस इश्यूज क्या हैं, चाहे वो फेडरेशन के प्रोविंस के साथ हों, चाहे वो इंट्रा प्रोविंस हो, चाहे वो इंट्रा डिस्ट्रिक्ट हो, चाहे वो इंटर प्रोविंस हो. That is unfortunate, but thank you very much, sir, for being candid with us. Now I'll request Janab Ashfaq Mahmood sir. Sir, kindly take the floor. Evaluate the availability of water for food security of Pakistan. Yes, sir. Slide on. जी सर, आगे पीछे करने के लिए.
ठीक है. और ये लेजर है.
जी सर. इसको चलना चाहिए आइडियली स्पीकिंग, लेकिन स्लाइड का ही सर आई थिंक आप यहाँ से चलो.
लेजर तो नहीं. अच्छा, यहाँ से होगा.
जी सर.
अच्छा,
स्लाइड को आगे का.
ठीक है. थैंक यू. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As you know, today I will be talking about an evaluation of the availability of water for agriculture needs of Pakistan. Given the time slot of 15 minutes, I would like to be very brief, but hopefully I'll be able to convey some message with regards to the water availability. At the time of independence, we were receiving water from 6 major rivers from the eastern border: Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Satluj, and Beas. And from the western side, across the Durand line, we were receiving water. We are still receiving water from Kabul River. Out of this water that comes through these major rivers, about 59% is coming from across the border, 12% from Afghanistan side, and 47% from the eastern border. So firstly, I would like to say that we are vulnerable for the water we receive. But what happened at the time of just immediately after the independence is that in 1948, India stopped flow of water to Pakistan. And as a result of subsequent negotiations and finalization of the Indus Waters Treaty, we were left with 3 rivers from the eastern side and Kabul River from the western. And these percentages of water availability from across the border are after the Indus Waters Treaty. So you can see that we face some threat for building of dams and harnessing of water from on the other side of the borders. And that's a point that we must note as we move forward. About 70% of the water that we receive comes from snowmelt and glaciers, and the rest is from the rainfall. And this is an account of the total water we receive. We measure water in million acre feet or billion cubic meters. 1 million acre feet means that an area of 1 million acres with 1 feet of depth. That's the volume of the water. Now, from the 3 rivers that we got from the under the Indus Waters Treaty plus Kabul, we receive about 138 million acre feet of water. And the remaining water which we get as a leftover from the eastern rivers, which is Ravi, Satluj, and Beas, which were allocated to India, is about 2.7 million acre feet. So in total, with these large rivers, we get about 141 million acre feet of water. The rest is rainfall, etc. We have 3 basins. Indus basin is the largest. Then we have small basin Karan. We have some water coming in Balochistan and also the Makran region. The water that we get in the rivers is highly variable because it is based upon up to 70% from snow melt and glacier melt. In the Kharif season, On the average, we receive about 115 million acre feet. And in Rabi, we receive on the average about 25 million acre feet. So about 82% of the water is available in Kharif, and about 18% is available in Rabi. But there is a high degree of variability across this mean. We were 23% higher than this average in 91, 92. So there's a lot of variability, and that will be accentuated with more climate and global change effects. And the minimum was as low as 31%, and similarly in the Rabi. So the point that I want to highlight is that whereas we have an average over a certain period, but this average is not, should not make us complacent, as complacency is something which is going to be very dangerous. Now, in order to harness the water which is surplus in the Kharif period, and also to compensate for the water that we lost to India on the three rivers, three major reservoirs were built: Tarbela, Mangla, and Chashma. Their original capacity was 17.95 million acre feet, but we have lost about 24% of this because of the siltation and damage to the reservoirs. At this point in time, we have only 13.69 million acre feet of water, and this represents just 10% or slightly less than 10% of the annual river flow. This is extremely low as compared to the world practice, whereas in Colorado Basin, for instance, the capacity is about 5 times the river flow, and we are by all standards keeping very low capacity, and it's further dwindling because of the siltation. But we have luckily 2 dams under construction. The Basha Dam will add about 6.4 million acre feet of live capacity, and Mohammed Dam will add about 0.6 million acre feet. But this is a belated development. It is still in process. There are problems, there are issues of financing, there are implementation issues. So it is going to take something like between 8 to 10 years that we will have this capacity available. And till then, we will have to live with depleting capacity and further loss of water that goes down in the floods. Now, this slide shows how much water is going down below Kotri. Most of it is going to sea. Now, in different years, as you can see, that up to 1997, there were high, the peaks are high, and very large quantities of water were going into sea. Later on, after the development of the dams and then after the changes in the climate, we are now sending about, on the average, about 26, 27 million acre feet of water to sea. But if you look at the very last few slides, you'll see that there are practically as high as this year, we spent about 31 million acre feet of water to sea. In 2010, we sent about above 50, and the rest, there have been at times there have been very low amount of water which is going to sea. So there are like drought-like situations, and there are like surplus situations that water is going to sea, and we are unable to harness that water. So this underscores the need for inter-seasonal and inter-year transfers of water so that we can store when water is available and use it in the period when it is needed. This variability and this situation will be further altered on the negative side because of the climate change and the global change. First of all, because of the global warming, the water requirements of crops, human beings, cattle will increase. So our demand will increase than what we already have. Sea level rise is taking place. It will intrude into the delta, into the lower part of Sindh, will erode the quality and would also diminish the water available for various agricultural uses. glacier melt. Predictions are that next 30 to 40 years, there will be more water available. So if we don't do anything, we'll be sending water to sea. And then after the glaciers melt to a substantial extent, then we will experience water shortages in due course of time, and so on. Since my colleague is going to give a detailed presentation on global warming, so I will only give this brief message. Now we have to see about how do we use this water that we get. Out of the 177 million acre feet of water, we divert about 101.4 million acre feet of water through barrages into the canal system, the irrigation system. Now, once we get this diverted from the barrages, the 104 million acre feet of water, we only receive about 58.4 at the farmhead. The rest is lost or disappears. I would not call all of that as a loss, but it doesn't appear at the farmhead in the conveyance, which means certain amount is lost in evaporation, certain is seepage, certain is mixing with the saline water, and so on. So, and some of that is actually theft. We don't account for that. So what we actually receive is about 58.4 million acre feet of water, and the rest is lost. Now, I put it in red, 43 million acre feet of water does not reach the field. And if we can save only even 5% of that, that means 2.1 million acre feet of water. Now, to this we add the groundwater, which is about 50 million acre feet of water, and together that forms a pool for distribution amongst the farmers. Now, this 50 million is also the threshold. In fact, it is crossing the threshold of aquifers. The recharge and the abstraction of water almost balance. In fact, they are more in the negative form. So this is the limit, I would say, that we have reached. And then this water that we pump from the ground is expensive. It's like 30 times more expensive than the water we receive. So it adds to the miseries of the water farmers who have to pay for this, and they then look for some compensation in the support price, etc., etc. So about 108 million acre feet of water reaches the farmhead, and when it is applied on the farm through water courses and others, we again lose a lot of water because our agricultural practices are like this, and our fields are like this, and our soil and our porosity of the soil is different. So something like 29% of the water available at the farmhead is gone. It does not go to the roots. This amounts to about 31.5 million acre feet of water. So what we are left with, again, just in the red, I have mentioned that even if we save 10% of the water that we apply to the field, we save about 3.2 million acre feet of water. Now, what is available for the consumption is 77.2 million acre feet. And in overall terms, if I account for the overall efficiency, the efficiency of use in overall terms is about, including the groundwater that is applied, is about 50.9% or so. Now, where does this water go? On the right side, there's a small table that I've shown that about 93 million acre feet is the demand of water for different crops. And we have about 77.2. So basically, we are short of water right up front of the amount of 16 million acre feet. If you look at the yellow box here, 16 million acre feet of water is already short in our agriculture. And the projections by WAPDA and experts show that the overall shortage in the country will increase to 70 million acre feet, of which 60 million acre feet is the shortage which is anticipated for agriculture. Now, I would like to put a caveat on it, and that is that this is with business as usual, the way we use it now, the kind of practice that we have in agriculture. So the overall situation is that we are short, and we are going to be further short by 60 million acre feet. And in terms of the water scarcity, the water scarcity is water stress. If there is a per capita availability is less than 1700 million acre, 1700 cubic meters per capita, then it is called a water stressed country. Now, the water scarce country is one which is for which the threshold is 1000 cubic meters per capita. And in our case, we are almost at that threshold, a little less than that. And if we do not address these things, then because of population growth, even the per capita availability will decline. And it is being projected that it will be less than 800 or 700 cubic meters of water per capita into 2050. So we are extremely water shortage. So now I have put a question as to where to find this water, because nature has given this water, this cycle continues. There is an average that I have shown. It average is actually going to decline after some time because of the global warming and the glacier melt and snow melt. And so we will be facing a scarcity increase in Pakistan, not only because of population, but anyway in terms of the total quantum of water. So first of all, we need to find this water by saving water going to sea. We need to build large dams in order to save water which is available in surplus years or surplus seasons, and then bring it back to the system so that we can use it in a way that is most appropriate for agriculture. Second, we need to also manage the monsoon waters, the hill torrents. The water which we saw this year, the floods were actually monsoon driven. Those were not the river floods, as to say. So there is a lot of water which we are wasting anyway. So we need to utilize that water so that we can, and for that we need check dams, small dams, and other structures for routing this, the floods to, say, to the desert areas, so that we don't lose that water. Of course, I don't mean that we don't send any water to sea, because there are environmental flows which are also necessary. But if we do the calculations, we have at least water for 2 more large dams and for cultivating different areas while meeting the environmental flow requirements of the delta areas in Sindh. The second point is that we improve efficiency. We are using water in a very inefficient way. I informed you that our overall efficiency is about 59%. If we increase it by just 5% overall efficiency, then we save 7.6 million acre feet of water. Now, this is equal to a large dam. It is equal to a Basha dam. With very little expenditure, we can save just by managing ourselves properly and putting right technologies in place. So the overall is the illustration of the typical values of canal distributaries, etc. But the message here is we are short of water. We need to improve our efficiency, and we will be able to get more water by very little investment. Then we need to improve the water productivity through efficient irrigation. Now, we are producing about 130 grams per cubic meter of water. Whereas there are examples here in this that India is 3390, China is 800, USA is 1560. So we need to improve. There is a lot of scope and practices available, and case studies available, actual practices available, which show that the production can be increased. The crop per drop can be improved. And I have on the right side a small chart which shows that we are closer to the least efficient of flood irrigation, which is like flooding the farm and let the water evaporate, let the water seep, and not doing precision agriculture as well as not doing land leveling, not employing technologies like furrow and bed, raised bed technologies, bubblers, drip irrigation, and so on. So there's a lot of scope. Information is available. The world is doing it. In fact, within Pakistan, there are also progressive farmers who have applied these technologies, and they are showing their performance that the production, the crop per drop has substantially increased. But it needs to be taken up in a bigger way and in all provinces so that we can use the water properly. Otherwise, if we remain on business as usual, we will be short of water, as I mentioned earlier. Then we need to rationalize the water use. We are talking about food security. Now, look at it, this chart, this table. 83% of the water is consumed by 8 crops. Now, we need to look at it more carefully and see where we can economize. For instance, sugarcane. We might, if we need to irrigate more areas, there are many areas which are yet to be irrigated or cultivated. There is about 30% of the land of the cultivable area in Pakistan. We can save water from crops like sugarcane and divert it to what is needed for food. But of course, it is easier said than done. If we demand it, if we issue directives, if we issue a policy, it usually doesn't work because it's not command and control. Of course, there has to be regulations on groundwater and other things, but there has to be incentives. Why sugarcane is picking up and replacing our cotton areas and so on and so forth is because of some incentives that they have. I can go in detail, but for the time being, I'll just make this mention. If we give more incentives to shift to the other cash crops or the food crops, then there is a possibility. And here lies the food security of Pakistan. Now, there are other areas of enhancement of availability of water. So one has to remember that I've used the word enhancement, not the addition or creation, because this is the water that God has given us, this bounty, and that's the limit of that. Of course, I've mentioned about rainwater harvesting, and usually we think when we talk about rainwater harvesting, we think of doing it in the urban areas, putting it on the rooftops and putting in small rainwater harvesting arrangements. But we have hill torrents, we have Barani areas. We are only harvesting about 20% of the rainwater in the Barani area. There's a lot of water available which we don't utilize. We need to also talk about how much water is withdrawn by provinces, because provinces have a very grudging attitude of keeping their shares, which may be there. But for instance, there are the withdrawals in the share which Sindh may need, keeping in view the groundwater levels may be somewhat different. Maybe they need more water for more areas, but if they just hold on to that and apply that water, that will actually be increasing the water table, which will be reaching the root zone and will not be giving that kind of productivity of the crop that is needed. We need to conserve also. We are using water indiscriminately, very ruthlessly. We are wasting water even in the urban areas. We can see car washing and lawn mowing and so on and so forth. We need to price water. But water, it is very sensitive subject for agriculture, because when we talk about water pricing, they feel that we are talking something against the farmers. But it is since as long as it is free, there's not much incentive to conserve and to improve the technological use. Recycling used water is another option from where we can get water. So our focus should be to recycle, to process, to even most of the water that we get in the urban areas is actually flushed down. The actual consumption is 10 to 15%. So there is water available. We need to manage it properly. Then we need to be very careful about the transboundary waters. As I said, we had problems in the beginning. We have a treaty with India, and now that treaty is there. At least we should ensure that that treaty is not violated in any manner whatsoever, because that will be encroachment and that will reduce water for our agriculture. Similarly, on the western, across the Durand line, we need to remember that Afghanistan has plans of building dams. So we need to proactively strategize as to how to handle that situation. Can we ask India to Afghanistan to not to build any dam, or to think of some sort of benefit sharing arrangements so that the water is not lost in that quantity that we want, and there is some sharing of benefits of the water that Afghanistan may actually extract. Population control is extremely important. This has been mentioned, so I don't go into detail, but per capita availability of water is declining. And unless we take this, we move away from water engineering and water science and water economics, talk about the social side, this is extremely important for Pakistan to make sure that its water is available. I've talked about the seawater intrusions and so on. Lastly, I would talk about information dissemination. We talk about different fora, but the water, all these technologies and everything is important, but a lot of responsibility lies on the people themselves. And unless we inform them, and unless we create a lobby and a constituency for water efficiency and water use in proper manner, we will not succeed. I have hardly seen any media clip or documentary on TVs or other places which are at prime time talking about water, the water efficiency, how water should not be wasted, what is the responsibility of the citizen, what is the responsibility of the academia, what is the responsibility of the farmer. Hardly any. And if you turn over to, I had been looking at DTV, the German TV, they have prime time programs which are documentaries which teach, which communicate the message of saving water. So in nutshell, we will be very scarce of water if we do not address, and if we do not tighten the belts now and move away from the business as usual. Of course, I've talked about the population control. Now, 4 questions were raised in the beginning by Director General Saab. I could only note 3. So if I missed anyone, I would like to answer. But the answer to that is, now what is the issue? Water scarcity is there. It is going to increase if business remains as usual, and if we don't wake up, and if we don't look at it as a responsibility as a country that we have to do. Second, who is responsible? I think we are all responsible. But to begin with, if I have to zero in on some action, we are lacking implementation. We know all these things. It's not rocket science. Many of these are known to agriculture departments, the governments, but the doers, the drivers in the seat, which happen to be the governments and which happen to be a political and bureaucratic institutions together, unless they move forward and take actions, including the Ministry of Finance, which has to set aside money. If we want to say that, if we say that agriculture is an agriculture country, so our first priority in budget should be complete financing of the agricultural needs, rather than saying that we need this much for this. And even, of course, everybody is a competing claimant. But if we are mindful of overcoming the food security, and remember that if we have good, healthy people, the rest of the economy will prosper by itself. The third, you asked about what is the immediate solution, what can be done. I think in the short term, the lowest hanging fruit is efficiency improvement, water conservation. You try to produce more. Now, this will also, in fact, involve private sector putting their own money into it, because they see the benefits of that. And then, of course, in the longer term, it could be the bigger dams and so on. But the lowest hanging fruit, which can deliver you benefits within 2 years, in fact, less than 2 years, is efficiency improvement. We need to propagate, we need to institutionalize, we need to make people know where to get from, for instance, the drip irrigation. And lastly, it will also, we should also remember that the agriculture production, GDP based on agriculture, consumes the least amount of electricity. the least amount of, except for the diesel fuel that it is running. So it's a least, agriculture sector is least energy intensive, whereas the industries are more. So if we take this route of financing and moving the agriculture as a priority number one, our energy bill will also be somewhat different than what we have now. So that will also have a collateral effect of benefit in Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. You already answered the fourth question also. It was about the long-term strategy. So long-term building dam, you correctly remembered all the four questions. Thank you very much. I'm just recalling the Chinese sage Sun Tzu, 2,500 years ago, it said, if you know yourself and know the enemy, you need not to worry about 1,000 battles. So as Dr. Saab has said, Secretary Saab has said, we know everything. हमें अपने मसाइल का पता है, लेकिन इम्प्लीमेंटेशन की वजह से, गवर्नेंस की वजह से हम उन्हें इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं कर पाते, उन्हें हल नहीं कर पाते. तो हो सकता है इसका जवाब हमें सुलेरी साहब ने दिया हो. स्टंटेड नेशन है, तो हो सकता है लीडरशिप में भी कुछ लोग स्टंटेड हों और वो डिसीजन उस वक्त जो लेने चाहिए थे शायद नहीं ले सके हों. तो इस वजह से सो दैट मीन्स हमें पहले न्यूट्रिशन लेवल को बेहतर करना पड़ेगा ताकि उस लेवल पे स्टंटेड लोग ना पहुंचे, ताकि आज हम ये डिस्कशन ना करें. मे आई नाउ रिक्वेस्ट हिज एक्सीलेंसी, फ्लोर इज योर्स सर. विल टॉक अबाउट क्लाइमेट चेंज.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before I describe the impacts of climate change on food security, I'd like to refer to the definition of food security by the World Food Summit in 1996. Dr. Abid Suleri briefly referred to that. Food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary requirements for an active and healthy life. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations further elaborated these key dimensions of food security. First is availability of food. A country should either produce its own food or be able to import, or in some cases receive food aid from international or bilateral sources. Food excess means individuals should have the money, the resources to buy food, to access food. And the utilization of food means utilization through adequate diet, clean water, sanitation, and health care to attain a state of nutritional well-being when all physiological needs are met. Food stability means the ability of a population, household, or individual to have access to sufficient food at all times. As far as the topic of my presentation is concerned, since the global discourse on climate change began in the mid-19 1980s. Increasing attention has been paid to the likely consequences of the impacts of climate change on food security, especially in the global south, that is the developing countries. This is because all the impacts of global warming and climatic variability, which I will refer to, affect one or the other dimension of food security that I described. What are the impacts of climate change? The impacts of climate change have been identified by climate scientists, and at the international level, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was established in 1988, with the mandate to assess the climate trends, the drivers of climate change, and the impacts of climate change, and how the international community could address the negative impacts of climate change. The first impact that I would like to mention, and Ashfaq Mahmood also mentioned that, is that the higher surface and ocean temperature in the Arctic and in the oceans have caused rising sea levels. All the seas, the levels have been rising, inundating the coastal regions and island states. Island states are particularly vulnerable. They might simply vanish. Sea level, the intrusion also damage human settlements and salinate fresh water, thereby threatening farming, because salinized water is no good for agriculture, as well as fishing. And so farmers and fishers are forced to seek alternative livelihoods and homes elsewhere. We have 1,000 plus, about 1,050 kilometers of coastline in Balochistan and Sindh provinces. And there have been reports of climate migration. We've heard a figure of between 1 and 2 million people, mostly farmers and the fishing community, who have had to try and find alternative homes, basically in the cities of Sindh. But we need to carry out further investigations in order to know the impact, the scale and magnitude of the problem of climate migration. The most important and the most frequent impacts of climate change are more frequent, longer lasting, and more intense extreme events, such as floods, which we have seen. The opposite of floods, droughts, cyclones and storms, and heat waves, which damage watercourses and irrigation. Infrastructure such as headworks, barrages, bridges, dam reservoirs, lakes and ponds and wetlands. In the recent floods also, a number of these essential water infrastructure have been badly affected, destroyed. Pakistan has witnessed an exponential increase in the number of extreme events during the past 5 decades. Of course, the better known, the better remembered are the super floods, such as those in 2010 and 2022, which have caused huge losses and damages, making food, agriculture, and livestock sector the most climate vulnerable economic sector in Pakistan. We've had prolonged droughts during 1996 to 2002. The negative impacts of those droughts on our agriculture have never been fully repaired or undone. There is also the mention of the rapid melting of snow and ice in the Himalaya, Karakoram, Hindu Kush mountain glaciers. Initially, as Ashfaq Mahmood mentioned, for the first 20, 30 years, you will have flash floods, glacial lake outburst floods, and you will have more water in the Indus rivers. But after the glacier mass has been eroded, you're going to have a net and reduction in the water flowing down from the glaciers and feeding our rivers. Now, for a number of scientific and other reasons, it is a fact that the Indus Basin rivers depend far more on glacial melt than, say, the what I would call the sister basins of Brahmaputra and Ganges, which get more water from precipitation. But the Indus, the rivers depend far more, about 50% of their total assets come from the glacial melt. Another source, basically Pakistan's water comes from two sources. There is the glacial, the ice and snow melt, and there is the monsoons, which come twice a year in winter and summer. The monsoons supplement and replenish the river flows, of course, replenish the ponds and lakes and wetlands, and also recharge the aquifer. I think the recharging of the aquifer is most important because the aquifer has become really our saving grace. The aquifer, the Indus aquifer, which was one of the richest, and which we are virtually destroying by excessive abstraction through the 1.5 or 2 million tube wells. We didn't have tube wells until the Indus Water Treaty, which provided for 300 tractors, large-sized tube wells, to supplement the amount of water or to replenish the losses of the eastern rivers, which were given to India. And but now the Indus aquifer is being excessively depleted by both Pakistan and India, and it is becoming almost as bad as the aquifer in the Gulf countries, which is essentially a desert region. Ashfaq Mahmood mentioned pricing of water and also rationalizing the withdrawals from aquifers. I think that is the most important factor in Pakistan's agricultural economy, as well as in our overall water security. There is also, because of climate change, there will be and there is increased evapotranspiration caused by higher temperature, heat waves, and droughts, which results in a drastic reduction of surface water, which is stored by the dam reservoirs, lakes, and watercourses. The last impact that I would like to mention is, and in terms of food security, is what does food require? It requires water. It also requires good quality soil. Climate change impacts, all the impacts, heat waves, floods, droughts, will degrade the quality of land. Our land soil is already poor. We talk about the great fertile lands of Punjab and all, but if you calculate the total amount of land, most of our soil is arid or hyper-arid, and only a third or 40% of the soil is first class. So climate change impacts will further erode the fertility of the soil. Now, all the effects, all the cumulative effects of climate change will be a net reduction in the amount and also quality of fresh water resources. Now, as yet, it's impossible to predict the reduction of water as a result of climate change in precise quantitative terms. But some studies mention, the IPCC has mentioned the figure of 25 to 30% reduction. That is business as usual if the international community fails to drastically reduce emissions, which are the primary cause of global warming. So the fact that Ashfaq Mahmood mentioned how for about 5 months or so you have 80% availability of water, and there are 4 months or so which are lean months where there's a drastic reduction. And because of this variability in the amount of water available for agriculture, you have to go for perennial irrigation. There are many countries in the world which, including Ukraine, they grow perfectly fine large amounts of grain and others through precipitation. They don't need perennial irrigation, but India and Pakistan, Egypt, we need perennial irrigation. The other impact that will affect our food quality, and which I mentioned, that the food should be of sufficient nutritious value, is that first there will be reduced crop yields as a result of higher temperature, and also the quality of food will be degraded. So basically, the more important impact going beyond food security is the overall economic development of the country. The IPCC has warned that the cumulative effects of climate change will be increase in poverty and slowing down of poverty eradication efforts. So you will have more poor people. If you look at the assessment, which was done by Pakistani ministries and the European Union, the World Bank and Asian Development Bank, and other UN agencies facilitated by the World Bank, the losses suffered by the agriculture, food, and livestock sector amounted to about a quarter of all the losses that were caused by the recent floods. The losses in this sector, agriculture, food, livestock, and fisheries, was estimated at worth 800 billion rupees. And the losses were estimated at the damage 800 and the losses 1986 billion rupees. Now, as you all know, and we have celebrated that, we received far beyond our expectations, generous project funding. I think it's important to emphasize that the funding we have that has been pledged is predicated on the preparation of projects and programs by Pakistan. We have been promised generous support by the Islamic Development Bank. That alone is $4.2 billion. The World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the Chinese Bank of Infrastructure Development, and some friendly governments. They all have promised up to 9 billion or in excess of that. And so we have generous response to our request. We also have the documentation that was prepared by Pakistan for the Geneva discussion, identified specific measures in all the 6 or 7 economic sectors for reconstruction and rehabilitation. The Ministry of Climate Change has also prepared a national adaptation plan, which has, unsurprisingly, water resources, agriculture, and livestock are at the top of the 5-6 sectors that are covered by the national adaptation plan. Now, Dr. Shamsi was asking, what's the problem? The problem in Pakistan is not the preparation of plans and projects and documents and policies. The problem in Pakistan, for a long time, once upon a time, we were good at implementing projects. We no longer are, because the institutional arrangements for translating plans and projects into tangible facts has been eroded. So one hopes that the government, both at the federal and provincial levels, would be able to resuscitate the institutions which will help in translating the plans for which we have been promised generous support. Otherwise, we are in very serious trouble. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would invite President CAS, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan, to deliver the closing remarks for today's event. Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan has rich experience in aviation and industrial management, diplomacy, and negotiations. During his service, he remained on various important command and staff appointments, including Vice Chief of the Air Staff and Chairman Pakistan Aeronautical Complex Board. He has also served as Pakistan's Air Attaché in New Delhi, India. He is the co-author of The Aviation City and Milestones about the growth of the military aviation industry in Pakistan and its way forward.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. At the fag end of the day, first of all, let me thank the honorable panel for a rich discourse and enlightening us on a subject so crucial, so important for Pakistan. because food security is not only about feeding people. It is about giving them their due rights. When they're not fed well, they're malnourished. Pakistan has 25% population which is malnourished. And when this generation comes up, what kind of leadership is expected as the honorable? So the food security has serious implication. One, the population is vulnerable to exploitation. A person who gets up in the morning with the total objective of earning 2 meals for his family at the end of the day, what do you expect him to contribute towards the nation building? The day he doesn't get 2 foods, he starts to steal. He starts to become a law and order problem. Therefore, the nation of unfed or malnourished people is extremely vulnerable and leads to theft, crime, and poor law and order. Number one, essential part of national security. Second is, they cannot, this population, portion of the population, as amply highlighted, cannot contribute towards the nation building, and therefore your security is compromised. Third, externally, another important thing, this population is subject to exploitation by the external enemies and internal enemies. Therefore, the war on terror is likely to suffer. Because you have people who can be purchased. Let's face it. The bomb sent by TTP from Kandahar is not coming from Afghanistan. It is made here. Somebody transports it. Somebody puts some fuel into the transport, and somebody ignites it in the petrol. They're all local. They are purchasable commodities available when they are not given their basic rights. So the state of Pakistan has the responsibility of providing the food security to its people as defined by one of the speakers, and I would like to repeat that, something very important, must have access to sufficient food of correct dietary mix at all times. That's the bare minimum requirement of a common Pakistani. We all know where we stand today. I had written a few more things, but due to shortage of time, I'll just bring out some conclusions that gotten by the panel. First and foremost, very important, Fakhar Imam have said, we need quality HR and need to invest in research and development. Until we do that, if we do not develop our own research for improvement, we will continue to buy things from outside. Today, Pakistan spends in 2022, one of the research carried out by National Security Division, $9.7 billion on food imports. That is where your economy lies. And that is what we're getting from, after begging from abroad, and we spend on import of food. So where do we go if we don't have our own infrastructure of good people and carry out the research? Suleri Saab is gone. He pointed out the precision agriculture. Yes, we need to improve our agriculture techniques and need to get more output, as also pointed out by another speaker. There is a need to work out the concept of insurance to farmers. For instance, the floods have taken away everything in Sindh from the farmers. There is no compensation for anybody, or there may be some minor thing. So the system is, I think, good proposal. Climate change is increasing poverty. And poverty means your national security. The one thing very clearly coming out is governance. Everything is related to how the things are managed. The cartels, the influentials, the elite continue to run the show, with the poor people continue to suffer. So the governance has to take its priority. Agriculture, as Honorable Fakhar Imam Sahib said, has never been a priority. So therefore, if you do not have a priority from a system that is supposed to ensure food security and in turn your security, it also, by the way, is responsible for feeding 42% of the labor. At the end, very rightly said, it is not the system which is the issue. It's the people which is the issue. People who manage the system, who take decisions and continue difficulties in terms of self or vested interest. If I may say, that means our national security has to define food security as one of the vital national interests if you want to ensure security. The silver lining is that last few years, the National Security Division, combined with think tanks, have come out with a policy which is no more based on geostrategy, it is based on geoeconomics, where agriculture or human security forms part of it. How much of it gets implemented, it is yet to be seen. Once again, thank you very much, sir. Very enlightened with the discourse. And thank you very much for sparing time. And thank you very much for to the guests. I see a lot of old faces, and I'm grateful that you take our invitation and come to this place. Thank you very much.
Give a small memento to our speakers. Just for 2 minutes. Just please join us for lunch.